All right, so this is for the notes populations. So this is India. A lot of these are just going to be the definitions of some of the things that you would see when talking about populations. So, and pretty much I think in this first one, most of it is putting in that first word, the definition, and then a couple things afterwards. So just be careful when you type, and be careful to make sure that you're spelling things correctly, because I cannot account for every possible misspelled word on the planet. So population is the number of people living in a given area. So this doesn't necessarily even have to be like on Earth. You could be the population size of the school, population size of the classroom. Well, you're not really living there, I guess, but you're there at the moment. Overpopulation occurs when a population exceeds the carrying capacity of its ecological niche. So really what it is you're overpopulated when you don't have enough resources to support the people. So if there's not enough food for all the people, now you're overpopulated because you don't have enough food. If you don't have enough housing, if you don't have enough, even I would say not enough jobs might even be kind of leaning you towards overpopulation. All right, ecological niche describes how population responds to distribution of resources. So that's the because a niche is like your place in whatever it happens to be. So this is how the population obviously responds to having enough food, not having enough food. So what happens depending on those resources? Carrying capacity is like, in your country, you can, like, let's say, looking at the resources or whatever, you can be like, all right, we can sustain another 100,000 people, and that's it. Looking at how many resources we have, how much food, how many jobs, whatever. So if you don't have enough, now you've got a problem. And population density is essentially how close people live. So if you have a bunch of houses that are all really, really close together and no space in between, and that's it, then you're pretty dense. But if the houses are spread out a little bit more, or spread out a lot, then you're less dense. You're more spread out. Normally, when you look at populations, you're going to end up with lots of charts, graphs, things like that. Questions, right? Well, for each one in the chat, can get some extra XP. So, which country in the table has the least amount of acres per person? So if we look up here, we've got people per square mile, people per acre, acres per person. Yes. Hong Kong is correct. So acres per person, this is what we're looking at. So acres per person, and this is the smallest amount. All right, which country in the table has the most amount of acres per person? All right. Good. It's Brazil. So we're looking down here, which this is a ridiculous amount. Who has the most people per square mile? So we want to look at where people per square mile is. Oh. All right. So we got it. So it's Hong Kong. This is, I guess if you see Hong Kong and Bangladesh together, it almost like I wish they would have put the comma in here so it would be more obvious, but they have 14,501 people per square mile, which is again insane. Crazy. All right. So I got that down. So I got the people down who got it right first. Okay. All right. So these are also terms you'll hear. So anytime you see rate, that's a percentage. So if you see where it says rate, expect to see a percent. Or possibly a fraction if they're like, all right, every 50 out of 100 or something like that. Like you might see that as well. The first two are synonyms. Death rate and mortality rate are the same. Try to think of, you've got mortal and you've got, so infant mortality rate. Infants are babies, so, and when we look at that, we can see a lot of times how the countries are doing with medical and medicine and that kind of stuff, because and also like prenatal care, so the mother's coming in to have checkups and whatever. So we'll see that the mortality rate is lower. So you want this to be low, all right? We'll see it lower in countries that have better, like, medical. All right. Life expectancy, we can also say, is not just really years of baby, like a person is expected to live. So if we say the life expectancy of a person in China versus the life expectancy of a person in the United States and compare that. So, but they are looking from, I guess, birth to death. And again, things like medicine help a lot, and then having the right amount of resources. So food, water kind of deal, that will sort of do a number on you. Having a decent place to live so you're not living in, like, sanitation helps a lot because it lowers disease. So if you have this higher standard of living than they talked about in the other chapter, then that will help because it keeps things cleaner and the expectations higher, and it essentially keeps people alive longer. And if somebody can let me know when the people who are in class are done with their bathroom break, that'll be good. Okay. Alright, so here are some more charts. So this is, what is this? Infant mortality rates. So hang on, including Greece, Jerusalem, certain. Alright, so technically, deaths per 1,000 births. Alright, so this is, I guess, the best. And it goes up. I would also take into account how many people live in, like how large the country is. And, yeah. So Cuba's the worst. And I say that because the United States is, like, right there. But also New Zealand, Ireland, Greece. So this is not, like, surprising putting it into here. So there's probably people, like, countries past Cuba. A lot of these are those European nations. So it's really not that terrible. Not here. Not the ones represented here. All right. Here we go again. We got some questions. So, what does fatality rate mean? What do you think it means? There's one of the, yes, good. It does mean how many people die. All right, hang on. All right, so which disease is most likely to kill people, basically? All right, I'll count that as correct. It is AIDS, untreated. So there are treatments now, and it's pretty interesting actually if you see like the percentage difference. So untreated, it's 85%, but only 20% for treated. So that's normally like, good thing. All right. What disease has the lowest fatality rate? Yep, seasonal flu. Yeah, it's a little tiny. And this is another way you can see how different charts can be, so that it doesn't have to be your regular like bar graph or pie chart or whatever. So bird flu was one of the worst ones. I think it's also called like avian flu. Tuberculosis used to be like super bad, but it ends up with like a lot of fluid in your lungs and stuff like that. Serious MRSA, this is when you have an infection in, I think, the blood. Go back. SARS is like COVID is a form of SARS. So bubonic plague was only 5%, so it wasn't as bad as you would think compared to some of this other stuff. Swine flu, malaria. All right. The second, it says malaria. So that is, I can't remember what it actually affects. It's definitely going to affect your stomach. MRSA is, let me see. Let me see if I can. Oh no, this is not what. No, yeah. All right. Methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, a bacterium that causes infections in different parts of the body. It's tougher to treat than most strains of Staphylococcus aureus, or staph, so staph infection, because it's resistant to some commonly used antibiotics. So, yeah, so this is like a serious, essentially, like staph infection. So it depends. Normally, I think the problem is when it really gets into your like blood and gets throughout your body. That's when you're gonna run into like super big issues. All right. Yeah, that would be bad if you like felt like just terrible all the time. All right. So here we have, oh, this is more statistics. So honestly, I'm gonna skip this for now so that we can get to this. All right. So, after the chapter push-pull factors, you should already have an idea of this. So, push factor, force, which acts to drive people away. So, pushing people away, pushing people down. And pull factor is something that pulls you in, pulls you up, whatever. And in here, in these charts, I just have listed some of the things that are push-pull factors. And so you'll see, and again, I think I've said this before, you'll always have a push and pull factor at the same time. So, for example, if there are better jobs in a different location, then you are leaving because of lack of job opportunities. So, lack of job opportunities is pushing you out, while better job opportunities is pulling you over there. So, it's the same thing when you have immigration and emigration. You're gonna emigrate out of a country, and you're gonna immigrate into another country. So, you will have both in the situation. So, the way that it's worded changes it from pull or push. So if it's positive, if it's good, it's pull. If it's bad, it's push. So that's if you can remember that part, then you'll always know whether it's a push or a pull. Who needs more time on this slide? Anybody need more time on this slide? Are you sure? All right. I used to think this question was hard until I figured out that it's not. All right. Reasons for migrations of people are described as push factors and pull factors, which was a pull factor for many immigrants coming to the United States between 1780 and 1850. Now, so far, we haven't learned about this, but you don't need to know. Like, you don't need to know what actually historically happened. Correct. The answer is jobs. Because if we look, political oppression, that's a bad thing. Colonization's kind of iffy. It really depends on if you're the colonizer or the colonized, I guess. And overpopulation is a bad thing. So, but job opportunities are very clearly a good thing. So it's really the only pull factor that's in there. So make sure you answer, in this case, job opportunities is the correct answer for that second part. And then you can hit submit.